Mecpow X4 laser right here in front of me. It's class 1 laser, nice unit. I did a assembly video on it here not too long ago, assembly and setup, and yes, it's a nice laser. It has a couple things on it that I don't like, mainly just one thing, that is you cannot frame with the lid open. The safety shuts it off, and what I like to do when I'm framing something, if I've got a small project and I'm trying to frame it and I need to adjust that a little bit, I like to reach in and make that little adjustment while it's still framing, and then I'll frame it again to make sure it's good. So what I'm going to do here is going to make a layout grid for this. And I've taken the bottom tray out. This tray slides out right here. And I'm going to cut a piece of 1/2 inch MDF to fit inside here, which needs to be exactly 23 wide by 25 deep. So I'm going to cut it just slightly oversized and then sand the edges if I need to fit within these little flanges, because what I do not want is for that to move. Once that's in there, it needs to have no play whatsoever, because I'm going to engrave a grid on it, which I'm going to use on the laser, because I use absolute coordinates. I start from center. I'll be able to line everything up and know that my piece that I'm going to engrave is in there in the right place. So what I need to do first is get that piece of MDF cut. Okay, here it is. I cut it just a hair oversized and then sanded it accordingly to make everything fit perfect. And I need to take just a little bit off the length yet, but we're pretty close to having it right. Just a hair more. There we go, perfect fit down inside. No slop, no move. Now I'll sand this before I get my grid on there. You want to make sure that your piece of MDF or plywood, if you're using that would work too. I prefer to use MDF, it gives a darker burn on the layout engrave. Make sure it fits all the way down inside these little turned up flanges on here. You don't want any high spots. You want to make sure this is perfectly flat, perfectly level. Obviously don't use a piece of MDF that's warped or cupped. You want it perfectly flat. Now what I like to do before I put my grid on is I like to sand this. So I'll take it down to 120, makes it nice and smooth. And it takes any of that factory glaze or whatever there is off of it. And of course make sure you de-dust it. It's not necessary to put any kind of finish on it. You don't need to do that. Just engrave directly on it. Okay, and then once everything is all good and smoothed out and you're happy with it, we'll just slide this back inside the laser. Make sure it goes all the way back. I'll bring this forward so I can work with it a little better. Now I'll get the laptop out. We'll get a grid set up. What I'm doing here is framing this to, I had to do a whole bunch of experimenting here to find out exactly what the dimensions were. If you're doing this in inches when you do your setup, it's 16.141 inches on the x-axis and 15.748 on the y-axis. That's their stated work area of 410 millimeter on the x and 400 on the y. In reality, on the x-axis is 408 millimeters and on the y-axis is 395. So this is going to make a difference on my grid because my grid is 400 by 400. So on the x-axis it will fit without a problem. On the y-axis it's going to be a little long, so I'm going to probably just shrink it a couple millimeters. It won't really matter that much on my layouts because I'm using it mostly for the straight lines to get my project laid out in there. What I'm doing here is just a little bit of a test engrave for the line and doing the fill for what's going to be the numbers on there. Just a little scrap of MDF in there, and it is focused on it, and I have framed that, so we'll start that. And yes, I am using air assist. Okay, and taking a look at this here, I am going to increase my speed a little bit on the fill, otherwise the lines look just fine. I'll do another test here before I actually do the grid. Okay, and speeding up the speed, I took it from I think 3,000 to, I took it from 4,000 to 6,000 millimeters per minute at 40% power, and I don't have any of that kind of scorching overblow stuff. It'll make good numbers. The line here is 5,000 millimeters per minute at 50% power. And then there'll be a secondary line on the grid for laying out things like round objects and coasters, etc. That'll be engraved at 3,000 millimeters per minute at 50% power. And both of the line engravings is done in 2 passes. So there'll be 2 passes for each. Makes a nice deep engrave, but doesn't give you any scorching. So something you need to remember now, since we're actually engraving on the base down here, you need to set the focus to focus on the base, not on the piece of wood I was just working on. So I need to lower my head here, put a little kickstand down, like so down there, and I'll flip that back up, and we are ready to go. I'll have to home it again here, and then I need to reload my pattern. I've altered the size of my grid from 400 by 400 to 395 by 395. All I did was shrink it. So that means the 10 millimeter squares aren't going to be exactly 10 millimeter. But for what I'm doing and what I'll be using this for, it's literally close enough. I don't want to take the time to build a completely new 395 millimeter grid. It takes quite a bit of time to make one of those. So I've already framed this. So all I need to do here is hit start, and away it goes. Here's the grid I'm engraving. Again, the settings on this, for this laser, if you're doing this on a different laser, your settings may be different. For the first lines, the black lines, is 5,000 millimeters per minute at 50% power, 2 passes. The line. The red lines are 3,000 millimeters per minute, 50% power, 2 passes. The fill, which is the blue, which are the numbers, is 6,000 millimeters per minute at 40% power. Trying not to get too much reflection of the shop ceiling lights on this acrylic cover, but if you are using my file, which will be in the description, it's a 400 millimeter layout grid, and as I said, you'll have to shrink it down a little bit for this laser. You may think it's skipping lines. Well, it's not. Those are the lines that will actually are the red layer, which will engrave at a slower speed, same power. It'll make a darker line, and it'll come back and get those. Okay, and there's a completed layout grid. And that will help when lining up projects and knowing where they are. Since I work on absolute coordinates and I work from center, it'll be very easy for me to get my projects lined up. So there it is, a layout grid for the Mecpow X4. I will put a link in the description on where you can get one of these lasers. It's a nice class 1 laser. It's 22 watt output. And I'll put a link in the description of where you can go to download the file. It's a Lightburn file for a 400 by 400 millimeter grid. As I said, the actual, the stated working area of this is 410 millimeter on the X and 400 on the Y. And like most lasers, it's not quite that. It's 408 millimeters on the X and 395 on the Y. I chose not to design an entire another layout grid to make it 395 or 408 by 395. I ended up being 405 by 395. It takes a lot of time to do those, so I just elected to shrink this one down just slightly. And nominal difference. Like I said, we're not building a spaceship here. It's mainly used just to lay things out and have them positioned. Because as I mentioned earlier, you cannot frame with the lid open. So if the lid's open, you're not going to do any framing and you can't do any adjusting. So if you got anything out of this, appreciate getting a thumbs up. Always helps the channel. Roger in the shop. Thanks for watching. See you on the next one.